Okay, welcome everybody. This is the final session this week of our preparatory intervention sessions around the FS-02 competition, interview, and written exercise. So I'm hoping everybody is well. Before we start the main body talking about certain competencies, does anybody have any questions, any concerns they want to raise right now? Anything they want to talk about right now? Go for it. We also have some mentors on the line. We have Vanessa, and we have Colleen. Colleen is shy. She has turned off her video so nobody can see her face. I posted in the chat the YouTube links to the recordings that we've done before. So those of you who have come after I've posted it, could somebody please also repost those links for later people so that they can see them as well. Okay, Susan, please go ahead.
Yes, hi, PJ. I was just wondering, for the scenario given, sometimes you're given more information than required. So how do we spot those red herrings?
Yeah, that's
what can we tell which parts are not really necessary to get full points?
Yeah, well, the way that I would approach those things is, first, when you first read a question, particularly if it's quite long, you just want to read it and you jot down your first impressions. Your first impressions are the main point. The thing is, understand this, you can miss some things in a question and you can still pass it, right? You don't have to catch everything, and it's impossible for you to catch everything in a question. So when you read through at first read, the things that leap out immediately are going to be the main things. Then remember what we said is that you jot down what you know of the competency, you jot down the things that you know you need to address, and then before you structure your answer, you go back and read the question a second time. It's when you read the question a second time, you start to notice what's really important. Normally what you'll see is that the things that jumped out at you are reinforced. It's like if there was an interpersonal conflict, well, you read it again, sure enough, there's an interpersonal conflict, right? If they start talking about things that don't have anything to do with what you need to answer the question, it's either a red herring or it's not that important, right? What do you think, Vanessa and Colleen?
Yeah, and I would also, depending on where you are in your exam or your interview, think about what you've already said in areas where you think you've already shown your strength. So if you've already discussed your if the red herring part, if you're trying to identify if it's a red herring or not, if you've already discussed like your judgment really, really well somewhere else, you can then just sort of dismiss it a little bit because they're just looking for overall within all the questions that you hit all the core competencies. So if you felt like you've really given a solid answer, you can save that time to really flesh out your interpersonal conflict management and things like that, which does usually take a while because you need to give a lot of context to that because you want to come off as the shining star in those examples. So you need some time to build those well.
Yeah, I think what you need to do is focus more on what the definition of that competency is. And again, remember, you'll have it at the top of the screen. So whatever the competency is, that's what you need to focus on for the question. Things that don't have to do with the competency, it's either nice to have or it's, irrelevant and you don't need to worry about it as much, right?
Yeah, I think what I would add.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
No, that's okay. I know it's hard because I'm not on the video. I think I would definitely echo what both of you are saying and think of it this way. The way that I think of it is there's no right or wrong answer. It's a scenario. There's many different ways that you could answer that question. So again, as both the other mentors said, bring it back down to the competency. Which competencies are they asking you about? And make sure you hit those keywords, not verbatim necessarily, but hit those key bullet points of the competency and you can't go wrong. I think that would be my best advice. So don't worry about the scenario. Don't worry, I've never been in this scenario before. It doesn't matter. It's just about your judgment and how you think the thing through. So I'd try to keep that at the forefront.
And remember as well that this competition, as I've said before, it's open to the entire public service of Canada, right? So there are people in the competition right now who've never worked in global affairs before. So the way they're presenting questions, they have to be fair to everybody. So that means they can't trip you up on things that really only a Global Affairs Canada officer would know, right? They can't hold that against you if you don't know it, right? So don't worry about it. Use your common sense, use your best judgment, focus on the competency, read through the material. And again, once you think you've given a really solid answer to the question, again, we've talked about leaving time for yourself at the end, not using all the time in the first go round. If you have that time at the end, then what you do is you review the question again, review your notes again. And if you want to address something that may or may not be a red herring, you can always throw it in. It's not going to go against you, right? You can always say, oh, okay, but there was also this element that was mentioned, and I'm not sure how relevant it is, but in case you wanted to hear something about it, here's what I think. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, any other questions or comments, concerns, feelings, panics? Anything?
Yes, CJ. I have a quick question. Actually,
Sure.
you know what? I mean, I think I don't know if I speak for all of us, but this is incredibly it's providing us grounding that is so fantastic, and your repetition, your kindness to repeat these things over and over again, as much as you go, oh, I got it the first time. No, we need to hear it 4 times, is brilliant. I'm just wondering, with all the stuff going on right now, Indigenous, other, how important is current events? Because they did mention 2019, 2020, I believe, for the GAC, for the written component, right, that we will be tested on. Oh, sorry, was it 2020 and 2021?
What they had initially in your session, Rasha, I'm coming to you next. I do see your hand, don't worry. So for what Eve's question is about knowledge of the Global Affairs Canada's departmental priorities. When you were first advised, it said that you needed to look at the departmental plan for 2020-21, which is last fiscal years.
Right.
Apparently now, according to your documents that you have received in your email confirmations, they've removed the year. As a matter of fact, they removed the reference to the departmental plan, but that's where Global Affairs Canada's priorities are. They're in the departmental plan.
Right.
And the departmental plan, as you know, is a publicly available document. So if it were me, I would pick the most recent one. And again, this has come up when we were talking in other sessions about the knowledge section, and people are really nervous. Like, which one should I be studying? Which one? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're not trying to trip you up. They're not trying to trick you. They just want you to know some priorities. And if you happen to study, 2021, then what you would do is you state that at the top. To say, you've asked about the priorities. For your reference, please note that I'm referring to the priorities from this year, right? If you've done the most recent one, that's what you say, right?
And current events, don't worry too much.
Yeah, don't worry. Because if they don't tell you which one to study, if it's open, then you, don't go back 10 years. Doesn't make sense. But go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, and when you're giving your answer, you don't want to because what they're looking at is they're looking at your ability to analyze a body of knowledge, right? And so they want to see that you're pulling out these themes and these trends, and none of the departmental plans or priorities will like completely do a 180. Sorry, there's my children. None of them will do a 180 per year, right? They'll modify their approach. You'll see a theme like be deprioritized and a new theme get more priority or whatever, and something added, but in a small way, so you'll see these trend lines, and that's what they're looking for. They want to understand that how global affairs sort of fits in the entire world of Government of Canada, and how that all leads to what we're trying to achieve as a team and as a community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, step back for a second. Understand that this is a competition trying to bring in new foreign service officers at the FS-2 level. And the idea, of course, is that an FS-2 officer will become an FS-3 and FS-4, will progress through the ranks, right? So what they want to know, do you have an understanding of why you're here and what you do? It's not just the work that you have on your desk. You fit within an overall picture, and they want to know that you have a good sense of what that picture is. You don't have to know every bit of detail, but you need to be able to step back and say, you know what, the big picture is this. These are the different parts in that big picture, and this is how I fit in. And this is how I help move things along. That's what they're looking for, right?
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Rasha, sorry, I said I was coming back to you. Here you are.
Don't worry, CJ. I just have to, before I ask my question, really echo what Eve said. Thank you so much. You cannot over repeat what you share in your advice. So I know we all really appreciate it. And these sessions have just been absolutely invaluable. So my question, 2 questions. The first one is, when we speak to the bigger picture, how big do we go? Do we mention the speech from the throne? Do we mention mandate letters? Do we mention the budget and how all these different things fit together? Or do we really focus on the departmental plan? And the second question is, I've heard different advice in terms of, yes, she has built what we wish we had everyone had started. So yes, I agree. And the second question is about the scenario question. So when they're testing for the competencies, I've heard from some people they won't be listing the competencies. Some think they will. So I don't know if they've confirmed that they will know each of the competencies in each scenario, or if they don't, we just try to hit as many competencies as we can in each question. So, but thanks again.
Okay, we'll start with the second one first, and then we'll go back to the first. So the second one you're asking, when you have your question on the screen, will they tell you what competency is being measured? Right? Is that the question?
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's on the screen. They tell you. They tell you. So,
Amazing. It makes it easier. It makes it easier.
yeah,
Thank you.
it makes it easier. So now you can focus as you answer the question, because otherwise they themselves would be a bit confused when they're trying to mark, right? Because they're trying to give you points according to competencies, and they have a scoring grid. So if they don't tell you what competency, and again, these scenarios can be answered from multiple different angles. So if there's a competency and what they're looking for is judgment, and you start talking about intercultural proficiency, you may give an excellent answer, but it doesn't match the evaluator's sheet, right? So now they're like, well, how do I measure this? That's why they tell you up front. Right, so that's that. And then go ahead, Vanessa, and then Colleen on that topic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that they might split up who marks these. So you want to make sure that your entire answer is self-contained and it does not need to relate to anything else you've ever said or anything else you've ever written. Because frequently what they'll do is they'll take all of question 1 and they'll give those to one person. That person will score all of question 1 for consistency and then pass back the final marks. Then they'll give all of question 2 to another person. So you want to make sure that your whatever you create stands alone and it is fully inclusive of whatever that question needs it to have.
Yeah, that's a good point. You cannot assume, for instance, in your recording that the person who's listening to answer number 3 has heard answer number 1. So you can't make reference, oh yeah, like I said in the other, no, you didn't say anything before. This is it. This 10 minutes, that's it, right? Go ahead, Colleen.
Thanks. Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And also to say that you only have, 10 minutes to answer the question. So I don't think there's enough time to kind of cover all of the competencies in each question. Really focus on, what are the competencies that are being asked in that question, because you won't have the time and you'll see it'll just fly by. So you need to be, organized, and in your preparation time, kind of keep that at the forefront. And then for the other question with regards to the bigger picture, I think it just goes back to what CJ said, like, you need to have a peripheral understanding of the linkages between your work, the work of the department as a whole, between the different streams, and the government of Canada. So it's not like an in-depth memorization, but I always recommend to people, yes, read the mandate letters. You should already, in a way, sort of have an understanding of GBA plus, just the greater government priorities and how that interplays into your work, and then you can't go wrong. So if you have an understanding of what your desk job is right now and how that relates to the bigger picture, I think it'll all start coming together. And one strategy that I use is kind of like a mind map when it comes to the different priorities, to kind of do a cloud. I see people laughing. I'm sure that's been already suggested, but I found that really helpful when I was preparing for the FS3, because it visually made a map, made the linkages, and I could put them all together. So that's one of my tips.
Yeah, and in terms of, I'm coming to you, Nuhed, next, but Rasha, in terms of your first question, the question that they're going to ask you is going to be based on knowledge of the departmental priorities, right? But those departmental priorities don't exist in a vacuum. They do come from somewhere, right? So there's what Parliament, why do we have a Parliament? Why do we have a Government of Canada? What are the goals of the Government of Canada? Oh, well, how do they carry out their mandate? Well, through all these departments and agencies, right? All these plethora of departments and agencies are all there to carry out the mandate of Parliament, right? And then each one of those departments and agencies has its own mandate, has its own role to play in carrying out the role of governing this country of ours, right? That's what it is. So when you say, should I look at all of these things? All of those things are all connected. They're all part of an ecosystem. The question you're going to get is going to be on the department priorities. So if you don't make reference to the mandate letters, if you don't make reference to the speech from the throne, that's not fatal. Certainly, it's no big deal. But if that helps you to situate where we are in Global Affairs Canada in the broader scheme of things, then by all means go right ahead. You can. If that would overwhelm you, then leave it alone. Okay, go ahead, Nuhed.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much, CG, for organizing this. I am very grateful, and I think that all of us are. So I am very concerned and panicked that 10 minutes won't be sufficient to cover the question, because I speak a lot, and I do remember, you know, competing for past competitions, and I do remember having more time and extra chance to record myself. And I know that this time we'll have only one shot.
But in the past,
So
when you recorded yourself more than once, you recorded yourself more than once in the practice. Is that not so? Because normally when you go and you start your 10-minute timer, that's it.
So no, it's not. No, I mean, in past competition at GAG for PM4 and PM5, I do remember that you had another chance to record yourself. So, I mean, if something gets wrong and, you know, your child are screaming or something happened, you know, you get the chance to record yourself for the second time. So that stressed me out. And I don't know if you have any like guidance on how to get prepared to cover all the 10 minutes preparation and speaking, because I know that I am very detailed person, and I am also perfectionist, so it doesn't help me at all. Thank you all for your guidance and help.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, so what I really, really recommend, and I've recommended this to my mentees as well, is that you practice the format. So get someone in your circle to give you a question, and I think there's some sample questions floating around. Get someone to give you a question, you write for 10 minutes, set your stopwatch, you write for 10 minutes, then you record yourself on your computer. I wouldn't use a Signet one, I'd use my personal computer, my phone or something. And then record yourself for 10 minutes with another stopwatch. And the first few will be brutal. You will notice that you did not make any eye contact at all. And they actually watch for that stuff. Even though it's a video recording, they're watching that you're not just sitting there reading your notes. They want to see that you're interacting with a virtual computer of some sort. Then you'll notice that you go way over time and you don't hit any of your key messages. You'll notice that your notes didn't actually prepare you for that, because you wrote like an essay. And then when you're trying to speak for the first time, you're trying to read and make this make sense and make eye contact. And, you know, I really recommend you practice the format timed the way that they will do it in the test multiple times to get used to it, so that that doesn't become an issue for you. And then you're just in there and you're just doing it for the first time recorded, but you're comfortable with the format.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Thank you,
So,
Vanessa.
yeah, it's really just comes down to practice, and it comes down to structure. You know, structure your answer, understand the question, focus on the question, leave yourself time as well. So don't practice talking for 10 minutes, practice talking for 7. And that way, even if you have adrenaline on the day of and you go over and you go to 8 minutes, that still gives you 2 minutes to go back, review what you've said, review your notes. If you've written something, review what you've written, and then you can modify, or you can add something or say, oh, you know, I misspoke earlier. I'd like to correct what I said. Actually, I meant this. Or, oh, I failed to address this point and I'd like to just address it now. And you add that piece, right? But you have to use that 10 minutes preparation time really wisely. That's really what's going to save you. It's the preparation time ahead of time. Go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you, CG and Vanessa.
Hi, good morning. I just have a quick question. This is a part that actually stressed me out. Is not, yeah, the interview does stress me out, but how much time are we supposed to put into this? I mean, like, starting from, you know, the more I've probably done about 6 to 8 hours with you this week. So thank you very much. I've tried to be in those sessions as much as I can. I started my holidays yesterday, so you can imagine how much, how a bit stressful. I'm glad I canceled my trip to Gaspésie while I'm in Quebec. So anyway, all of this to say, what stresses me out and listening to everyone is to say, you know, how much time? There's so many things I can consult. I'm getting overwhelmed. I've written examples, and just writing them for my interview, I'm stressing out. So, you know, I know you're not going to tell me 20 hours, 40 hours, 15 hours, you know, but it's just, I don't know. I need to vent. It's just a comment. I really don't know. At some point, I'm going to have to say, okay, this is it, right? I have my examples for each competencies. I've studied, I've practiced X time. I've spent 5 hours on this platform, you know, and this is it. You know what I mean? I don't know if you have any advice for this. because it's a never ending,
Yeah.
process.
Well, Colleen, you put your hand up to answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I want to change my answer now because I was going to say I did study for about 40 hours. But that wasn't sitting there reading for 40 hours. That was getting coaches, getting mentees, participating in sessions like this. I think there's different ways that throughout your day you can kind of absorb media or absorb the competencies in different ways that makes it more interesting. Also, I spoke with colleagues who were also in the competition and we kind of brainstormed together. So it made it more fun, like we're sitting out on my patio. And I know that not everybody has the same ability or time. So that's, and not everybody needs the same amount of time, right? Some people can just wing it and some people need more time. So I think it's, if anything else, it's an exercise of knowing yourself and knowing what you need to succeed. And at the end of the day, realizing, look, like it is what it is, and just, forgiving yourself and enjoying the summer and realizing that no matter what you do, it's, it's a process and there's no right or wrong answer. There's no kind of secret key to succeeding. It's going to be what it's going to be, and just, being okay with the outcome, whatever it is, and looking at it like a good learning experience.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Go ahead, Vanessa.
I want to double down on what Colleen said, because I think for me it was really hard when I failed one of these. That I'd like never failed anything in school, and so that for me was like a brutal ego check, because I was like, for the first time, like failing something, and then I looked back at my notes, and I looked back at my work, and I was like, well, maybe I could have done a bit better here, and I could have done a bit better there, and so I think just do the processes to the best of your abilities, and just be proud of your effort that you put in. Like, feel like you did the best you can given all your circumstances, given everything, and just be part of the process, the way Colleen was saying it, because it will be what it is. But just know that the things you control and the effort you can put in, that's the only thing you can control. So just be okay with it. And there's going to be more processes too, so it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we begin today? Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right. So what we've done so far is we've looked at each of the competencies being tested. We've looked at them individually for the oral expression, the oral part. And we looked at 2 sessions we've done on the knowledge of the Global Affairs Canada priorities and analytical thinking. So we've done 2 sessions on that. So, but if you look on your sheet, it does say that there are going to be 5 competencies tested across 4 questions. So that means that one of the questions is going to have 2 competencies being tested. Obviously, we don't know which 2 are going to be put together, but you do have to prepare yourself for, okay, if I needed to answer this question from 2 points of view, how do I make sure that I do that, right? So this is what we're going to practice today in this session. So we'll see who's going to volunteer, because I'm going to post a question. Those of you who are in the FS1 preparatory sessions will recognize this question because you've seen it there before. But I'm going to post a question, and we need some people to volunteer to give it their best shot to answer pieces of it. We won't ask you to answer the whole thing. I'm gonna break it into pieces so that you can answer. Okay? So come, let's see your hands. Let's see who's going to volunteer. People say, I want to see the question first. No, come, volunteer, come on. Yeah, I'm just getting the question now. I'm putting it here in the chat. Let's see if it comes from my properly. Did it work? There it is. All right. Do you want to hear what the competencies are first before you volunteer? Is that it?
Please.
All right. So it's influencing and alliance building and resilience and adaptability. Those 2 are together. And it's a fairly short question, but there's stuff in there. And what do I need all of you to do as well is pull up your definitions that you received from headquarters, that you see from HR, on those 2 competencies, right? Influencing and alliance building and resilience and adaptability. Remember, so what they've shared now, I shared it with the mentors though, Vanessa and Colleen, so you received these as well, but you'll notice that they're much shorter than what was normally in the GAC competency dictionary, right? It's essentially just the header. That's it. So, hey, do your best. That's essentially it. All right, do we have our volunteers? Shariqua, wonderful. Who else?
I actually had a question. I realized I raised my hand at the wrong time, but fine, I'll give it a shot.
Okay, what's your question?
My
Go ahead.
question was, do you suggest that we still take a look at the more detailed, like GAC competency tables, column 1 and 2, and try to get some, keywords? It might be better. Okay.
It certainly doesn't hurt you, and it gives. It's unfortunate that it gives you an advantage over people who are outside the department. However, if you are outside the department and you don't have access to the Global Affairs Canada Competency Dictionary, you should be aware that there are other ministries, other agencies that have also taken these kind of generic competencies and written points of view on what those mean. Of course, they're coming from the perspective of their department, but in some cases, they're actually quite well thought out. So for instance, I would encourage you to look at the management competencies that our friends at Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada have laid out, because that's available on a public site. And so you can pull up those definitions, and it gives you an idea of, oh, if I needed to flesh out my understanding of what this competency is, this kind of gives me some clues, right? All right, so are you ready? So, okay, I'm going to post the question. Yeah, Colleen's giving some good advice in the chat, saying that if you have access to the competency dictionary, really it's up to 2 for sure, and then some parts of 3 if you can manage it. But realize that once you're getting to column 3 and 4 of the GAC competency dictionary, you're moving into management levels, and the FS2 level is not a management level. All right, so let's read out the question. Influencing and alliance building resilience and adaptability. Here it is. You have recently arrived on posting in a country affected by an ongoing conflict. Your headquarters team expects you to report regularly on the situation as it relates to your responsibilities. A few weeks into your assignment, there's a major attack near your compound, and the security team indicates that you will not be able to leave the compound to attend any meetings or social gatherings for the foreseeable future. Many colleagues are upset. What would you do in these circumstances? So who are volunteers? Somebody needs to put their phone on mute, please. We have a lot of noise in the background.
Thanks for using
WebEx. That's your problem, using WebEx. Why using that? Who wishes to volunteer to tackle some of this based on the competencies? And we'll walk you through it, don't worry.
I can start.
Okay, so Eve's gonna try. Gwen is gonna try as well. Fantastic. Okay, so Eve.
Yeah.
What we'll do is, okay, let us talk about what jumps out at you. Do you want to focus on a particular competency first?
I guess resilience and adaptability I could target, but I guess let's talk about what jumps out.
Okay, talk about what jumps out at you first.
So who are you reporting to? So expects you to report. So I'm always sort of action oriented. So expects you to report regularly on the situation as it relates to your responsibilities. So I guess I would sort of think about what my role is. I would, of course, try to gather as much information as possible on the situation at hand. So I would do that through briefings, materials that are available. Of course, I would talk to my manager before I would engage with locally engaged staff, because there may be sensitivities there. There may be people I should speak with, people I shouldn't, or maybe they're extremely busy. Everyone, it's all hands on deck, so you don't want to take people's time. So I would tread carefully in that sense in reaching out. Although I find speaking to people, getting firsthand information extremely valuable. So again, working very closely with my manager, understanding protocols around emergency situations would be critical. Let's see here. Can't leave the compound to attend any meetings or social gatherings for the foreseeable future. So again, the resilience factor would play a role in that part of the question. And many colleagues are upset. So again, trying to be aware of cultural sensitivities, things you should say, things you shouldn't say. I would be treading very carefully. So those are my initial thoughts.
Very good.
not very comprehensive. I would try to, when I'm formulating my answer, but these are the jump out things.
Exactly. But again, when you get into the exam yourself, things will jump out at you, right?
Yes.
Things will jump out at you. So those are things you note down on your sheet right away. It's not your answer, it's the things that immediately leap out at you. And so those are most likely things you're going to have to address. They're the things that are the most obvious, right? The things where you, as a competent person, already see there's some action for you, right?
Right.
Okay, so there were some questions, or do people want to also give a crack at things? I'm coming to you in a second, Gwen, but I also want to ask if Nuhed and Rebecca have questions. Is that it?
No, I was going to jump in, but
okay.
I think somebody else had put the hand up first.
Okay, so Gwen and Rebecca, you guys are going to jump. Fantastic. Nuhed, are you asking a question, or are you jumping in?
Yeah.
Are you jumping in?
I'm jumping to add a few comments. Yes.
Okay, so Gwen first, then Nuhed, and then Rebecca, and then we'll go back and we're going to look at the question again, and we're going to look at the definitions of those competencies. So go ahead, Gwen first.
Okay, thanks, CJ. So basically, this is life in Kabul every day. So
you have an advantage, unfair advantage.
Tell us, share your wisdom.
So looking at the competencies and looking at the potential position I'm in, I make an assumption right up front that I'm FPDS because I'm familiar with that and can answer it from that perspective. And then I think about who I need to report to, the regularity of it, how I need to get that information, and then how I would work with colleagues in mission to ensure that whatever I'm doing is working together with them. And then also working together with our international counterparts and local counterparts and civil society counterparts. So I would start by thinking about what the needs are, what the information is I need, figure out who I know already, who I'm working with already, and then start kind of a snowball effect of asking people more questions. Say, we're all in the situation together. Obviously, we can't go out because we wouldn't be the only embassy facing this issue if this happened. And we also would have international organization counterparts that would be facing this. And so I would ask them, I'd build alliances and networks on top of what the embassy already has and what I've been given in my handover when I arrive. And then ask the people I'm talking to, who else do you recommend? Who are you working with? And how are you gathering this information, and kind of build up the network from there and snowball out into further contacts in order to gather as many points of information in order to respond to whatever the reporting requests are from headquarters. So like I said, pretty much what we do in Kabul all the time because there's lots of explosions and, well, there was a pandemic last year, so anyone who was posted during the pandemic knows what it's like not to be able to do anything outside your location, but also to need to gather information in an effective and honest way so that the reporting is as accurate as possible on the issues that are being requested from either management or HQ or otherwise. That would be my starting point.
Oh, well done. All right, let's keep going. We're going to keep going. What else jumps out at you? So Nuhed was next, and then Rebecca.
Yeah, I would add that, yeah, perfect for what my colleague said, make assumption, clarify my role as, I will say, as a DMCO, for example. I will for sure communicate with my supervisor and the home in order to get more information. And yeah.
Very good.
Also reaching out to my predecessor to get some, guidance and any advice on this kind of situation. After reaching out to my predecessor and having meetings with my colleagues, security and maybe the RPM, I will maybe talk to the senior consular officer to get his advice and guidance in such circumstances. And also I will reach out and collaborate with stakeholders such as the UK counterpart, US counterpart as well. That I mean, like the American colleagues and UK to see what are the next steps that are taken. And also I will sit down with the RPM and security crew to maybe go over the contingency plan and get more information to get prepared and think about the next steps.
Okay. Rebecca, do you have things to add? I see Catherine and Jose, you also have your hands up. Do you want to add things or do you have questions?
I was going to add something, but I'll take my turn when it comes.
Okay. All right. So those of you who are, okay, I'll do it like this. Catherine, Jose, Susan, and Lukash, I see that you have your hands up. I'm presuming that you want to add things. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the question more carefully. And when we do so, I'm going to call on you to come and add things at that point. Does that make sense? We need to go back and review the question a bit more carefully. So Rebecca, add what you're adding, and then we're going to look at the question and the competencies more carefully, and then we're going to answer again. All right.
Thanks. I think a lot of great things have already been said, but what I would draw attention to under resilience and adaptability is simply to also make sure that you state that you have boundaries, right? Personal boundaries. So with all the pressures that are going on, right, that you take care of yourself first, because if you are not well, then you can't work properly, right? And then there will be no reporting at all. So you know, talking a little bit about that as well would probably be good. And then just finally, also making sure to point out that to also integrate any kinds of specific demands from HQ and communicating what that the situation is difficult, and could they identify any priority items that they want to know about, and so that you could drop some other things if you had to kind of balance your. So putting the onus back, yeah, to HQ.
Very good. So there you go. So you've heard your colleagues. Those of you who've answered, thank you very much. You've done very well to add these kinds of details. But again, when you first see the question, you're not going to start answering right away. What you're going to do is note down the things that jump out at you, the things that seem to be the most important. And then at that point, you are going to go back and read the question again. And you are going to make sure that you really have a good handle on what the question is asking you. And some of your colleagues in the chat have really noticed, and what Rebecca has also mentioned, remember there are two competencies, and the wording of this question doesn't really necessarily require you to answer them all at once. You can answer them separately, but you have to answer them both. That's the question. So what we're going to do is review those two competencies, then we're going to read the question again. So those of you who have your competencies with you, you can pull them up now. Those of you who don't have them, I'll read it out, the English version, both of them for you now, right? So influencing and alliance building. Employees at Global Affairs Canada identify shared interests, both nationally and internationally, and cultivate them to persuade others. They know whose interests are at play, and they leverage those interests in Canada's favor. They think things through from the perspective of others, and they anticipate what they may need to support a position or accomplish a goal. They reach out to people and partners who could be of value to Canada regarding issues, both country-specific and global. They establish networks to gather insights and expand their sphere of influence. They collaborate with players who are diverse and dissimilar from themselves, including countries, non-governmental organizations, private sector, and cultural communities, right? That's influencing and alliance building. Resilience and adaptability goes like this. Employees at Global Affairs Canada maintain a constructive problem-solving approach in environments that are unpredictable and culturally challenging. They adapt readily to change and maintain focus and optimism in the face of tasks that make personal, emotional, and physical demands. They remain calm and resourceful in a crisis. They recover quickly from setbacks and adapt strategies to address them. They seek creative solutions, and they adapt personally and professionally to the conditions and challenges of living and working with other cultures, right? Those are the competencies that are being assessed. We want to see how good are you influencing and alliance building in this scenario, because that's the wording of the question. And how resilient and adaptable are you in this situation, right? So let's read the question again. And we're going to go slowly, 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 slowly. So I'm going back up. Hello, computer, help me out here. Here we go. Okay. So remember what we talked about before we go back and read the question, actually. We're going to talk again about structure. Last time round the bend here, talking about what structure do we normally recommend for these questions? Somebody say it.
Star.
There it is. And what is the star format, please?
Situation, task, action or assumption, and result. And you can also add the plus, which is reflection on your result if you can do better or learn lesson or things like that.
Very good. So
I've been attending too many sessions.
So many times, yes. So we recommend that that's the format that you use. You can use other formats if you want, but the star format imposes on you a logical progression. And again, part of what's being assessed in this exam is both your ability to communicate orally and your ability to communicate in writing. No matter how brilliant your points are or how brilliant your writing is, if you don't have a logical flow, they will not be able to understand what you're talking about. So you need a structure that guides your evaluator through your answer in a logical fashion, right? So that's what the star format helps you do. So going back to the question, as we read it now, we're going to go slowly. Yes? All right, so it starts off with this. You have recently arrived on posting in a country affected by an ongoing conflict. What did you learn from the first line? I'm going to go to my four who were putting their hands up second. Let's see, I think you still have your hands up there. Okay, Catherine, Susan, Lukash, and there was someone else as well. What did you learn, you four who had your hands up before? What did you learn from the very first line of the question?
That you're new.
You're new. Well, you're new at the post, right? You've just arrived. So
and it's probably a hardship 4 or 5.
The hardship mission. What else did you learn from the first line?
You've likely been briefed on the conflict prior to arriving.
Because it's an ongoing conflict.
It's ongoing.
It's an ongoing conflict. So that means there's information already existing about whatever the conflict is, right? There's information at headquarters, there's information certainly at the post, right? What else did you learn?
In addition to receiving information about the potential conflict that could arise, you've most likely also been prepared to deal with dangerous and conflicting situations that may require you to act in a way that supports this theme.
Well, you're going to presume in this that you're a superstar, right? So each of you is a superstar. You're not Superman, but you're a superstar, okay? We're going to talk about that. What didn't the first line tell you? What is information that you don't have from the first line?
Which country it is?
Don't know where you are. What
your
else?
Position, your string.
That's it. You don't know what stream you're in. So are these areas in which you can make some assumptions that assist you?
Yes.
Very good. So again, when you state your assumptions at the top, assume things that are going to be useful to you, right? Assume things that are going to be useful to you. But as you read through the questions, see if there's anything there that gives you a clue as to what you should assume and what you shouldn't, right? Again, this is a test for an FS-02 officer. Can you assume that you're an FS-02 officer at post?
Yes.
Yes. If you're an FS-02 officer at post, and it's such a difficult location and with an ongoing conflict, can you assume that you report to a program manager who's there with you at the post?
Yes.
Can you assume that? State your assumptions. Yes. Okay, we're going to continue reading the question slowly, slowly. Yes.
CJ, would you assume that you're not in trade if it's a major conflict in that country? I guess you might still have some trade, but I'm just thinking Afghanistan, for example, or
what?
But my window is trade.
Sure, but it doesn't say what the conflict is, right? That's the other thing. It does not tell you what the nature is of the conflict.
So that's
right?
still
there are trade officers right now in countries where there are ongoing conflicts.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
And they're still going in. So assume the stream again. Yeah, Colleen's quite correct. Assume the stream with which you're most familiar. And the thing is, these questions are going to be written in such a generic way that you can answer from whatever stream. That's the point of them, right? They're not going to trick you up and say, haha, you must answer from development. And if you're not a development officer, too bad. You know, they're not going to do that, right? Okay, so let's go to the second question, the second line. Your headquarters team expects you to report regularly on the situation as it relates to your responsibilities. All right, so what did you learn from the second line? Come by four, who have put their hands up. What did you learn?
You report to HQ.
Yeah,
and whatever you're reporting is your stream.
Yeah, so you have a team at HQ. You have people at HQ. Yes. And what else? They're expecting reporting. They're expecting reporting. So part of your job is to report on the situation, on this ongoing conflict. There's something about it that relates to your work, right? So you can't then ignore it. So when you answer the question about what you're going to do in these circumstances, remember one of the competencies is influencing and alliance building. Then that tells you then part of your work has to be about building networks, going out and talking to people, getting information about what's going on locally, who are the players, what have you, all of that, that's underneath that competency, as we read in the definition. So your headquarters is relying on you to provide information to them, right? So keep this in mind as you're going to be crafting, okay, what answer am I going to get? What's the next line? We'll read it carefully. A few weeks into your assignment. Oh, how long have you been at Post?
A few weeks.
So you are brand new. You're brand new.
Yes.
Right? Keep in mind, there is a major attack near your compound. What does that mean?
You're by your own.
What does that mean? There's a major attack near what?
First,
near your
work office.
Near your compound. What's a compound?
It's your own, no? SQ?
It could near SQ. It could also refer to your headquarters, your mission itself, right? The chancery, where you work.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't say that your own compound was attacked. It said there was a major attack nearby. Nearby. Yes. And the security team. Oh, what did you learn there?
There is a security team.
Have a security team. You have a security team at the mission. Yes. The security team indicates you will not be able to leave the compound to attend any meetings or social gatherings for the foreseeable future. So it says you can't leave. So you live and work in a place where you now cannot leave to attend any meetings or social gatherings for the foreseeable future, according to the security team. Yes? All right. Here's my favorite line. It's the next one. Many colleagues are upset. What did you learn from that line?
They're not happy with the situation, or they're not happy with the decision. They're not happy.
Yeah, so well, hold on.
We don't know why.
Hold on, go slowly. Many colleagues are upset. What did you learn?
It's not a small mission.
Well, they didn't tell us LES or CBS. They didn't tell us, is it political? Is it personal? Is it, I mean, there's a lot that we don't know. We just know that they're upset, but that could indicate, that could go in many different directions. But it also means we need to tread carefully and be in our sensitivity, in our personal and cultural.
First things first, many colleagues are upset. First thing you learn, you have many colleagues. That's the first thing you learn from there. How big is this mission? How big is the mission? Pretty big, right? Because if you have many colleagues, they must be a pretty big space, right? Second thing you learn, many colleagues are upset. Their emotional level has gone off the rails, right? So this is part of what resilience and adaptability talks about: keeping calm, keeping focused. It also talks about working with your own people that are around you and helping them keep calm and helping them keep focused. That's part of resilience and adaptability. It's all well and good you keep your own head, but if everyone else around you is running around crazy, that's not being, nobody's adapting well, right? You have to help the people around you as well, right? Let's go back. Many colleagues are upset. Did it say why? Well, no.
And it could be in your compound and outside your compound. I mean, it could be colleagues from across the board, right?
And again, there's a room for you to start to think through what that could mean, right? Many colleagues are upset. Is it because of the terrorist attack? Is it because of the security regulations that have now been recommended by the security team? Is it because they've been affected by the ongoing conflict? Is it because they have people who've been caught up in the terrorist attack that was nearby? You don't know, right?
Perhaps some people think about their family. If there's LES involved, there may be, yeah.
Could be this, yes. Go back one more time. Many colleagues are upset. What else did you learn from this? And bonus points if you catch this. If you're in the FS1, you know what it is.
Not all of them are upset.
Many does not mean all. Many is not all. So there are some colleagues who aren't upset. There are some colleagues who are fine, right? Do they know something you don't know? If you are looking to show that you are resilient and adaptable, you can keep calm, keep focused. If everyone, 90% of the mission is freaking out and 10% seem to have a cool head, do they know something you don't know? Do they have techniques that maybe you can learn from? Many is not all, right? Okay. Then the last sentence is, what would you do? So what's the question asking you? The question is asking you to list actions that you would take. What would you do? Right? Make sense? Do you see how when you go through the question a second time, you pick out things that you didn't see before? You see where there's room to make assumptions. You see where there's information that's lacking. There's always going to be information lacking, right? You see where you can start to craft your answer and start to think it through. Well, how exactly am I going to go about answering this question? Right? And again, this is a question with 2 competencies. In this situation, I'd recommend you deal with the 2 competencies in turn. And you have to answer the question in both situations, right? You have to answer it for influencing and alliance building, and you have to answer it for resilience and adaptability. So if you spend your time answering only 1 competency, you will fail because the question is asking you for 2 competency answers. You understand? That makes sense?
I have a question, but my hand's already raised. So I'm in a pickle. And I see 2 questions in there pretty much. And so just going back to what you just said, could I answer one question with 1 competency and the other question with the other competency, which seems to be fitting, to me, it's natural the way I see it. The reporting is one thing, and then the upset people is more for me resilience and adaptability.
Well, there's one question that was listed there. It said, what would you do? Right?
Yeah.
So you answer from one competency and you answer from the other. There you go.
Okay.
So you say, with respect to resilience and adaptability, I would do this, 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 and this. With respect to intercultural, influencing alliance building, I would do this, this, and this, right?
And can I assume in the assumption, so if I go back, I assume I'm an FS-02, I assume I'm in the security track. I'm DRPM, so I can use that too, right?
Sure, use whatever you like.
Okay.
Whatever helps you is what you're going to use, and whatever is not contradicted by the question, right? So in this question, it says, many colleagues are upset, right? It says you have a security team. It says all these different things. So you can't assume that this is a mission with 2 people in it. That goes contrary to the text of the question, right? So you can't assume something that's contrary to the question. You can't assume away the heart of the question. I've given this example before. If the question that is put to you is about how to resolve an interpersonal conflict, You can assume that, you know, the person, to say, you have to resolve it between two people who are your colleagues. You can assume that you and your two colleagues all speak the same language. You can assume that unless the question tells you differently. That's what's helpful to you, right? Because if there's a language barrier, all of a sudden now, you know, you can't even talk to each other. It doesn't make sense. You cannot assume for the purpose of that question that the two people went out for drinks yesterday and now they all have gotten along and haha, the conflict's been resolved and that's how you solved it. No, that's assuming away the heart of the question, right? So make assumptions where you have room to do so in a way that's going to be helpful to you, right?
But yeah,
go ahead.
I was just, if I was to structure my answer right now, like very quickly, I'm not going to give all the details, but I can state the situation and a few assumptions I just made. And then in the tasking, that's the part I was trying to figure out this morning and yesterday when I was doing my example. In the tasking, can I say I have two things to accomplish? The first is reporting. The second thing is to understand why people are upset and try to figure out how, you know, we can prevent that or adapt to it. Those are the two tasks I see. And next, here are the actions I would take for one, reporting, and here are the action I would take for two. And I'm going to go in order. And this is I'm gonna use this competency for reporting, and I'm going to use this competency for upset colleagues, and then I go from there. That works?
Yeah, that's a structure, okay. Right? That's a structure that helps guide the evaluator through your answer. Right?
Okay.
Makes sense?
Thank you.
So people who still have their hands up, do you have questions or do you want to comment? What is it that you'd like to do? I see Susan, Jose, Colleen has had to leave us. Bye, Colleen. And I see Rifa. If you have questions, Catherine's just finished her question. Susan, if you have a question, go ahead.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still here. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought you were leaving.
No, I put my hand up. I wanted to just piggyback, like to answer the last question a bit. I thought I wanted to add, because I think that I've heard, you know, in the different people that have given answers, I see sort of a trend that I just want to kind of course correct, because I think it's a trap that you'll find yourself in and many people find themselves in. Mm-hmm. You do not have the world on your shoulders and you are not there alone. It is not your job. And actually the question doesn't even say that it's your job to make the upset colleagues happy.
Exactly. I was going to say
it's not even a part of the question. So I think, again, take a step back, really read the question, what it's asking, really keep in mind the competencies that it's asking of you. And you're not you're not the hero. Like, you're the hero of your own life, but you're not the hero at a mission. Like, you're part of a team. And I think if you lose sight of that, you won't be able to successfully answer the question, because if you think about it in a situation like that, if you put the weight of the world on your shoulders, you actually won't be resilient. You're probably going to be part of the upset colleague group. Yeah. Like, so think of it as if it's real life. Exactly. Like, really think of it, like, project yourself into this situation. Think about how, like, actually would I be a successful team player? How would I successfully be resilient, you know, protecting my own sort of mental health? And that's not usually taking on everybody else's, you know, baggage. So it's like situating yourself within that context, within that larger role, and then thinking how would I actually deal with that? Should I be faced with the situation in real life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was more like my background as DRPM and being 14 months COVID. And, you know, there would have probably been another step where, you know, it's part of my responsibility, but there's an ERT and we would consult and HR would help. But I see your point. Thank you. I think it's more the background that was speaking.
Yeah, that's what you would do, because that would be tasked to you in real life, but that's not tasked to you in this question, right? The other thing as well, remember what I said at the top, is that you are a superstar, you're not Superman. Understand? Okay. There are more questions.
I have a question.
Susan, go ahead.
Okay, Susan, go ahead. So question and some comment on answering the question. Yes, so my question is, so earlier our colleague mentioned that reporting would be answering one competency, and then the dealing with colleagues or finding ways to make colleagues less upset would be adaptable.
No, that's not what we said. Dealing with the emotional impact and the difficulty of the situation in which you find yourself. That is where you show resilience. Nowhere in the question does it says you must be a therapist to the people around you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering, can you do both for each tasking?
You can.
Is it better if you do both, or
you think that's the way to go forward? Again, it depends on the wording of the question. To me, this question lends itself to talk about those two things separately. But read the question carefully. Does it lend itself to a particular structure? Make sense?
Okay.
Go ahead, Rifa.
Hey, CJ, how's it going?
Hey, Steve. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for hosting. These are gold. My question is, you know, when you see the question, do they actually tell you what the competency is?
Yes,
Does it
they
say,
tell you at the top.
Brilliant.
They tell you at the top.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Jose, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I missed a few of the earlier sessions, and I'm looking forward to listening to them. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating repeating some of the questions, but so there's two questions I have on this, and I've done other interviews at GAC, and I think this is where I kind of need improvement. Is one, maybe I'm trying to do too much, and I'm seeing the question, you've just arrived, and I think some of the answers that were provided, I feel like you would be a seasoned FS2 admission at that point if you know how to do all the protocols. If you've only been there a couple of weeks, couple of months, I think that there's some things there that I'm like, how do we not oversell ourselves in an interview question where it's like you're acting like the FS4 at the mission, not an FS2, and I feel like they're going to penalize us for that. It's showing that you're trying to take on more, like you were saying. So that was my first question. My second one is, there was a lot of terms thrown out there, GSRP, and I know what they are because I'm GAC as well. But for those that are not, again, should we not be avoiding some of the different acronyms that we have, the ERT, all of those things that I know what it is as well, but should I be applying it in my answer? Or should I not? Because this is a universal kind of response that they're looking for, not just to say, oh, I know what the MEP is, I know what the ERT is, I know what the protocols are, and that's what my answer is. And I feel like that will derail from what they're actually looking for.
Well, okay, let's start with the level, right? This is an FS2 competition. They're looking for competent FS2 officers. It is not competent to pretend that you are the FS4 at the mission, right? Imagine that in real life. Imagine that in real life. If you were the boss and you were a manager and you had an FS2 working for you who thought that they were the manager, how would that work? All right. You need to understand this is the level from which you're answering. The level from which you're answering is from an FS2, right? So sure, you have to show that you have an understanding of what's required at the mission. But again, you are the FS2, you have certain responsibilities. The responsibilities are normally laid out in the question, but it's not your job to manage the whole program. That's not normally what's given to an FS2. There are some FS2s who do this kind of work. That's true. But normally that's not what's given to an FS2. Normally an FS2 reports to a program manager of some kind, right? So understand this. Whatever situation in which what the question is giving you, normally you have a boss to whom you report. Normally you have somebody who can give you guidance. That's the norm. So keep this in mind as you go through. The other thing is that if you have a certain stream or a certain experience from which you're answering, and you want to make reference to that, make sure that you do not just start spouting off acronyms. You are not guaranteed that the evaluator who's looking and listening to your answer knows what those things are and is coming from your stream. You don't know that, right? So what you want to do is make sure that if you're going to talk about certain things, that you define those terms right up front. Avoid using too much jargon, because you can really get yourself down into the weeds if you do, right? What you want to do is talk about the actions you would take. That's what this question is asking you, right? The actions you would take. You don't necessarily need to use a lot of jargon to explain the actions. Imagine if you were explaining this to your family member who's not in the department. They say, oh my goodness, what did you do? Well, I use this, this technology, and I talk to this person in this acronym. Your family member would be totally lost. You could tell the whole story equally well, leaving out the jargon. I talk to my boss, and there's people at headquarters who also work on this stuff. They work on security issues. And so I referred to them because they're the ones who give us direction on security issues, right? No jargon, no acronyms, right? So think it through, like how exactly you want to craft your answer and how clear you want to make it. Because again, that's part of effective oral communication. You have to make things clear to the person who's evaluating you. Understand?
Yes.
CJ,
Thank you. Sorry, if I can just have a follow-up question on that, because I like somebody who wrote in the chat. So what is the ideal answer to this question? Can we just so we know? Because I mean, I'm seeing some of the points that my colleagues brought up, and I was like, well, I feel like, I don't know if I would go out and be the one who's not working right off the bat, or I would be relying more on my manager at this point for reporting. I mean, you're in a crisis situation. So what is the ideal answer if you're able to provide one? I would.
Colleen, would you like to give a crack at it?
Sure. I mean, the ideal answer, it's funny because it's not about, I said this at the top, it's not about a right or wrong answer. There is no right or wrong answer. It's about, and fundamentally all the questions underpin, like there's an element of judgment, right? An element of judgment on all of these questions and how you, thrown a crisis situation, which we face, every day when we're abroad, how you maintain calm and resourceful in the face of a crisis, right? That's resiliency and adaptability. And so fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. It's how you react. And so if you think of the competition in and of itself and this 10 minutes of a question, that's a crisis situation, right? Like when you're answering it, like how you maintain and deal with that situation in and of itself, keeping a level head, bringing in elements of how you are faced with, it could be any scenario that they give you, any scenario at all, in your personal life, in Canada, in a pandemic. Like the scenario, I think it's important to keep in mind the scenario doesn't actually matter. It's just about how you respond to stressful situations. That's kind of what the question, get to the core, the heart, as CJ said, the heart of the question is about dealing with a stressful situation, how you kind of protect yourself and remain calm, and also deliver on your tasks as part of this bigger picture, and know that you're not alone. I think that's the key that, I've heard a few times from a few people throughout this, that you're thrown that question, you feel, oh my God, it's my responsibility to like save, Canada and save. No, it's not. Like you have a role within a bigger picture, you have a boss, you may or may not have, be part of a committee or have subordinates, probably at the FS-02 level. They're not assuming that you have any subordinates, as CJ said. So I think really like try to take a step back, a few steps back, and look at your role and picture yourself, if you visualize or whatever technique it takes you to visualize yourself actually in that situation and where you fit in as part of a bigger picture. I think that might help to kind of, let the question itself be less daunting.
I think they're still frustrated, Colleen, because they haven't heard an answer. They've heard elements, but not an answer, right? They want an answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't, it's every person and every stream, like it depends on from what perspective. So you can't really, I know I'm giving like a political kind of answer, diplomatic answer, but we can't answer, there's no one right answer. So I can't give you, it's hitting on elements. Why doesn't somebody take a crack at it again, knowing all this, like take a crack of how from your perspective, whatever your role, MCO, trade, FPDS, dev, security, whatever, why doesn't somebody take a crack based on everything?
Have you raised your hand? Rebecca's raised her hand, and then Eve. Rebecca, have you raised your hand to ask a question?
Just to offer a comment on how to solve this problem, which is what is the perfect answer. And I think Colleen really made a good point. It really depends on your personal situation and your perspective. So what I would say is everybody has to go back and kind of answer it themselves, making sure that you hit on all the key elements of the definition. So that's the key point. Like you have to make sure that you're covering the definition, whatever you say, just make sure that you work in all of the elements.
Again, that's frustrating because that tells them what to do, doesn't tell them how to do it.
Practice. It comes back to practice. Like you have to feel more comfortable doing it in an exam scenario because there is no right or wrong answer.
I have a suggestion.
Sure.
I think may be applicable to all streams. In a crisis situation, structure and timelines are critical. So if you are reporting and you are liaising with HR and they want information on and updates on a daily basis, you will have a framework of where you're gathering your information, probably liaison with your counterparts, NGOs and others that are working, maybe information sharing and also who's doing what where. If you're dealing with a conflict, are there IDPs? Are you delivering services? So a structure of who you're liaising with on a daily basis, how you're gathering that information, and the timelines of when it needs to be delivered for sure would be in everyone's answer, in my opinion, in that kind of scenario. So that's just one piece of the, I guess, well, influencing. Okay, so now I'm on the task part, but influencing an alliance building, I guess it's knowing
competency. That's the competency.
Right.
The competency isn't results management. The competency is
but it's who you're liaising with, who you're liaising with on a daily basis, and clear timelines around how to gather that information and with whom.
All right. Shall we take a crack at it here? Would you like an answer?
Yes.
We'll try. I will try one here. I will try. Here we go. And this isn't easy. None of this is easy, right? But here we go. All right. So we say, well, for the purposes of this question, I presume that I'm an FS-02 officer at post at a large mission, because the question tells me that I have many colleagues and a security team. Because I'm an FS-02, I presume as well that I have a program manager who's giving me directions on the ground. And the question also tells me that I have a headquarters team, so I presume as well that I'm in regular communication with them. I also presume I have lots of LES colleagues in the mission, and that there are a number of other different programs that are represented at the mission. And I presume that I live and work in this compound that is referred to in the question as well. All right. Given that those are my assumptions, the situation in which I find myself is that I'm a brand new officer to post. I'm going to presume that this is my first posting, but that I'm not the first officer to be in this role. I presume that I've had a predecessor who's helped to brief me on the ongoing conflict that has gone on, and that headquarters also provides me with information. Now, what's happened, of course, is that there's been a terrorist attack, and the terrorist attack has had an impact on me. And given that the competencies being measured by this question are influencing an alliance building and resilience and adaptability, I'm presuming that the terrorist attack has influenced both of those things, right? Has influenced my ability to go out and make new contacts, has influenced my ability to go out and maintain and nurture the relationships that have already been built by my predecessor. And I'm presuming that the terrorist attack has also had an impact, an emotional impact on everybody at the mission, including myself. So the task at hand, of course, is to deal with those two things. One, it's the work that has been stated in the question, the reporting that I have to do. And I'm presuming that the reporting I have to do is linked to the competency in this question, which is influencing an alliance building. So I'm presuming that that is the element that's being tested here. And I'm assuming as well that I have to deal with the emotional impacts. So I'm going to answer those two things in turn. First, I'm going to talk about how I continue my work, my assignment to report regularly to headquarters on the ongoing conflict while in the midst of this mess, this terrorist attack and its aftermath, from the perspective of influencing an alliance building. And then I'm going to talk about how I, as an FS-02 officer at post, can maintain my resilience and adaptability in the wake of something that's really quite shocking that has affected everybody, including myself. So the first task is, I'm going to just look at it from the perspective of the reporting. So the reporting relies on this influencing an alliance building. So I'm presuming that I need to go out and talk to people to get regular information about the conflict so that I can give this back to headquarters. The question says regular reporting. I don't know what that means. So I'm going to presume that I have to provide a report normally every 2 weeks. The question asked me what I would do. I think the first step that I would take, of course, would be to talk to my program manager, and to agree that we could go back to headquarters and ask them to modify their expectations. perhaps it will not be reasonable for me to still be giving fulsome reports every 2 weeks. So the first thing I might want to do is kind of modify what they expect and just keep them on side with me. So that's how actually I would show some adaptability within this particular part of the question. But in terms of my influencing and alliance building, I note that this is an ongoing conflict. So that means that there may have been terrorist attacks in the past that have had this same impact on the mission in the past. Given that I'm new, I don't necessarily know how the mission has reacted before. So what I would do is talk to my program manager, whom I assume has been here longer than I have, and find out what's happened. How have they managed to still maintain their network? What tools have they used? And I would make a list then of those tools that I could use. In addition to that, I would go and I would speak to my locally engaged staff. They're the ones who have lived through things like this longer than any CBS who's been rotating in and out of the post. So I would go and ask them what they use to maintain their networks, how it is that they've turned to other ways of gathering information, and what tends to be something reliable that they could use in their reporting or in their programs, right? So I would not just look at the LES within my own program. I would also ask cross-stream. I would ask the LES in other programs as well, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's responsible for reporting on various issues. I want to make sure that I tap into that resource that's within the mission. Now, the security team has said that we can't leave the compound. What I would want to find out is who else is in this compound. Is it only our mission, or are there other missions that are within the compound? Are there other local contacts who are within the compound? How big is this space? If it's many city blocks, then it could be that, for instance, there are like-minded missions that are within the compound. So even though I can't leave the compound, maybe I can go and visit them. And I can then build up my relationships with our like-minded colleagues, or perhaps with non-governmental organizations that might be located within the compound. So I would try to see what was exactly is my sphere of influence, like what exactly I could do within the constraints that are given to me, right? I would also have to find out from, again, people who know better than I do, which is to say my counterparts, my colleagues, my boss, my headquarters, what are the sources of information that are reliable, that people have used in the past that have been proven to be correct in terms of monitoring an ongoing conflict. So if people have used a particular person's Twitter feed, for instance, and that has proven to be reliable, then I would need to know that, and I could access that Twitter feed most likely from within the mission. So I would not be violating any security protocols, but at the same time, it would allow me to continue to do my job, to continue to know who the key players are, and I could use those maybe social media tools to reach out to people and introduce myself, and then establish a connection that wouldn't require me to leave the compound and violate security protocols. So those are some of the actions I would take to continue building my network, on gathering information, and still reporting back to headquarters in such a way that makes sense based on the situation in which I find myself. So now I want to turn to resilience and adaptability and the emotional impact of what's going on. So I noticed that first of all, the question tells me that many colleagues are upset. There's a terrorist attack that has happened very close to our compound where we live, to the extent that it has caused this big security shift in our posture. You can't leave. So what I would want to do is, first of all, check in with myself. You know, I want to make sure that when I'm in a situation like this, I've never been in a situation where I've had to deal with a terrorist attack near my home. I would want to really make sure to check in with myself and do some exercises that I've incorporated in my life before to keep myself calm in a situation. So I would implement my meditation series and make sure that I would use that meditation series more frequently and make sure that I feel okay going in and out of work. The other thing I would do is try to get a sense of how normal this is. Are there terrorist attacks that happen all the time, or is this something that happens once in a blue moon in this ongoing conflict? If it's a one-off, then perhaps I would feel a bit more settled and I could actually adapt to the fact that one horrible thing has happened, but things would rapidly go back to some semblance of normal fairly quickly. If I'm supposed to adapt, however, to something that's regular, there are regularly terrorist attacks, then what I would do is maybe contact people at headquarters who are meant to help people through mental health issues, meant to help people through really shocking events, and make sure I open a channel of communication right away So I don't want to wait until I find myself in an emotional crisis. What I want to do is use the resources that are available to me to make sure that I stay on even keel. The other thing is that the question tells me that many of my colleagues are upset, but it doesn't say that all of my colleagues are upset. So if there are some colleagues who are near to me who seem to be okay, I might want to go and meet with them and talk to them and say, you know, you seem to be handling this situation quite well. Is there something that you can share with me about, you know, what it is that keeps you calm and keeps you, you know, on even keel while you're going through? Perhaps they have some tips that I could use, you know, and adopt in my personal life. And the other thing I would do is also maintain the relationships and maintain the habits that make me happy, that keep me on even keel outside of work, right? We all are very focused on the work that we do, but we also have to maintain a life outside of work so that we don't get sucked up into everything that happens in our work life. There's also our personal life. So for instance, I would make sure to maintain whatever exercise routine I normally would incorporate. I would also make sure to maintain the family relationships. I would maintain those discussions that I have with my family, check in a space that I find to be more quote unquote normal. And with that kind of emotional support, I think I could keep a good head on my shoulders. But as always, I would also check in with my boss. And if I did feel that I was going a bit off the rails, I would ask for help as soon as possible. So overall, I think this is how I would approach a situation like this, making sure to balance the work that I have to do in this very difficult situation, but also how I would make sure that I keep myself on even keel so that I remain calm and so that my own sense of calm and focus could be also transmitted to the people around me. And in so doing, in a small way, I could hope I could help them as well. So that is what I would do in this situation.
Excellent.
Can you hear me clapping?
Well done. Very well done.
You see?
Yeah.
Now, in this situation, I didn't make reference to the stream I was in. In this situation, I didn't make reference to, you know, any kind of jargon, left it out, right? But that's how you guide your interviewer through your answer, right? You start with saying where you are. You state your assumptions as much as you can remember off the top. If you need to make an assumption later on, go ahead. That's fine. In this question, you know, there were two parts. So we dealt with the two parts in turn, right? And then kind of walked through what I would do, making reference to the competency, because that's what it's about. It's measuring that competency, right? Makes sense?
Yes.
Go ahead, Emily.
So from your answer, I do understand is more about to address or to talk about the how. How would you do that, the step, more than finding real solution? And
Yeah.
I think that's the mistake I'm usually doing through those process, because I try to find right away on the top of my mind a solution. But I really understand from your perspective is really to explain what step I'm gonna take in order to resolve the issue, but not to bring real recommendation, because we don't have much information. And yeah, okay. Well, thank you. It's very useful. I will try to think like you. Well, we'll try.
If the question wants you to write a brief or find an answer, it will say so, right?
Yeah.
It will say, find an answer. It will say, write a brief. It will say so. Provide recommendations. It will say so. If it doesn't say so, normally what it says is, what steps would you take? What process would you use? How would you approach this, right? That's looking at what you would do step by step by step, right?
You're amazing. Sorry. It's just, oh wow, it seems so easy, but
We have to channel our inner CJ when we're in the doing the test.
Absolutely.
definitely.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I agree. It just seems so easy when you say it. I'm like, baby, évidemment. So maybe I'm jumping the gun here again, but for the result, did you say yesterday or the day before that it's the time to go back to the actual definition of the competencies? This is how I would achieve blah, 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 or I did achieve this, or did I just dream about that? Because I do dream about this competition.
But then normally in this kind of question, it's a hypothetical, right? So the result is always going to be that you're a superstar and you've done everything wonderful.
Of course.
So that's what's going to be. If somebody's asking you a question where it's, well, tell us a time when you had to be resilient in work, then that's when you would explain, well, this is what happened, right? At the end, I did all this stuff and this is what happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, Maria.
Sorry. Thank you so much for this. My question is related to how to prepare. Like, I feel like when I take a look at the chart of competencies, there's so much information. I have like a general sense of what each competency means, but I feel like when you answer your questions, you're referring to many of those sub items in each competition. And so I'm wondering, what is your your advice on how do we should we memorize, or like just keep the two main ones for each competition? And just because my manager, I was talking to my director yesterday, and she said, one tip that I give you is, you, as soon as you see the question and you see the competition, write down like the key things, like key lines on that, like keywords. But so how many, like 2, 3, like what's your advice on that?
It's more that now that they've given you these definitions, these competencies, now the definitions are fairly short. Those of you who've seen the competency dictionary know there's lots more detail that's there, right? But the idea is to get a sense of what's the core of this and why is this important for a foreign service officer to be able to master, to show that you can master, right? So that's where it starts. Like, what's this competency all about? You need to get it. You need to understand what the competency is all about. And then the definition will help you, give you some keywords or key phrases that you can use to weave into your answer, right? So it's like, what's this competency about? Well, alliance building, influencing and alliance building, it's about, establishing new networks with people, because we want to be able to use those networks to advocate Canada's positions. It's about, maintaining existing relationships, persuading other people, that's really what it's about. That's really what it's about. And then as you read the competency, you'll see different phrases or words that you can use to remind yourself what competency is about and to weave into your answer. So when you go in and you say, it's influencing and alliance building, you jot down those few things that you remember from that competency, and you know that you're going to refer to those going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Jose. I think Catherine was first, and then Jose.
Sorry, old hand. Old hand.
Oh, okay. Then Jose, go ahead.
Thanks, CJ. That was a really good answer. And you were within the 10 minutes. I was actually timing. And I was like, oh, that's great. I think I'm going to bust a time limit. I think I ramble, so that will be something I'm going to work on. But so I really liked your answer. So my quick question is, I noticed that you kind of stayed within the second column, like 2 of the competencies, didn't really go to the third one. So do you recommend that we avoid the third one, which is more of a managerial, reassuring others, help to address crisis when there's no protocols or policies in place, things like that, that it's a little bit more senior level. So, because I was looking at the competencies, and so I was like, I don't want to cross over to 3 if I don't have to too much, but if they're expecting us to do that a little bit and show a little bit more initiative, should we? Pretty much my question. Thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, not everybody has access to that competency dictionary, and that's not the definition that's been given to you, right? The definition has been given to you is really the chapeau at the top. That's the heading. That's the definition. So that's what they're marking against, right? You have, if you're inside Global Affairs Canada, you have access to that competency dictionary, but if they haven't given it to you, it means they can't mark you against it. So it can't go against you. It may help you if it helps you think through what that competency is all about for an FS2 officer. And you have to think through, well, are those things in column 3 and 4, are they really what an FS2 officer is expected to do? It's more like that, right?
Right. Sorry. Yeah, I know. I know from experience that there is LES reporting to FS2s, right? So I was thinking, is it a good addition to think, maybe reassuring your LES in a conflict situation?
Exactly. But don't think that it's your job to be the counselor for the LES. That's going a bit too far afield. What you can say is, you know what, if I'm feeling like people around me are really upset, I would really try to talk to people as well. I think it's not my job to counsel them, but certainly as an empathetic person, I would want to help them vent if they need to. If that helps them maintain a sense of calm and focus, I would be happy to do that as well, because I've done that before in my workplace, and that's my personality. And actually helping somebody else in this situation would actually help me maintain my own sense of equilibrium. Right? That's an easy way to weave it in. Makes sense?
CJ, you mentioned reaching out to headquarter mental health resources. So if you find that helpful, you can pass that along to your colleagues as well. It's not like a high level managerial thing, but it's just, being a good team player and watching out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's the way you weave in those kind of 3-level stuff if you're looking at those 4 columns, right? Realize it's not your job, but if you're wanting to be a little bit more helpful and resilient, this is the kind of thing you do. Yeah, makes sense? Any questions there? Go ahead if you have a question, comment.
I was just thinking too, if we're talking about our engagement with LES and we want to focus on self, I would think about not taking things personally. Like if people are burnt out and they're very upset, people might, make comments or, speak harshly or what have you. So just sort of keeping in mind not to take things personally in that sense, just sort of being aware that people, because you've just dropped in, right? So you're new and you want to be liked and you're making, so just sort of being aware of that. That was just
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm new at the post. This is also, it's maybe a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to establish really strong relationships and respectful relationships with my colleagues around me, both the CBS and the LES. So this is a way for me to show that, I'm somebody who can go with the flow as much as possible. I'm not here to rock the boat. I understand this is a stressful situation, and whatever it is that I'm required to do within reason, I'm happy to do. So I'm going to try as best as I can to be a team player in this situation, knowing that this situation may reoccur. Right? This is what's required. Go ahead, Shirikwa.
Just to touch on the earlier question about if we're unsure about touching on column 3, I guess for every question we can assume that we have a direct report and just assume that our level is like either, entry level FS2 or don't have any managerial capacity. So that if you make that assumption, unless it's assuming away the question, then you can just stick to column 1 and 2.
Or unless it doesn't help you at all, right? I mean, I'm not sure the extent to which assuming that you have a couple of direct reports would help you in this situation. Unless you wanted to make reference to that in terms of the work that you're doing, the reporting. You want to say, well, for the purpose of this question, I assume I have an assistant who reports to me. Fine, and then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to use their networks because, perhaps they don't live on the compound themselves, and perhaps they're free to come and go. So perhaps they can gather information that I don't have access to, something like that, right? Any other questions? That was a tricky one. I find the shorter questions are the trickier ones because there's less information there, right? And you gotta have to read it carefully to see what is this telling me? What's going on here? Have we talked about strategy again of how to write some of these things, how to speak to some of these things? I'll repeat some of the things we've said before. Again, practice some of these scenarios, practice going through your previous experience as well, because there may be some questions that are saying, tell us a time when you had to deal with, again, make one up, was it interpersonal conflict, Tell us a time when you had to do this, right? So you have to think back into your own personal history and your work history and pull out kind of rich examples that can be addressed from different angles. Anytime you're involved in a major project, anything that you're really proud of, that you worked on and it really went well, Normally, that's a situation that you can use for several different competencies, right? So you have to think through your own history and say, if I were going to be talking about this from the perspective of that competency, what would I say? How would I describe what happened using that STAR format? So that's one thing that we recommend you do, because you don't know which of these questions is going to be hypothetical and which one is going to be based on past experience. It may be half-half, it may be none, maybe all hypothetical scenarios and no actual situational ones, but we don't know. So to be on the safe side, think through your past history. If you think through your past history, then you can pull actually examples from your past history and weave it in to your answer. You don't have to do that necessarily unless the question asks you to, but if you do that, be smooth with it. Don't get off into the weeds, because the question is asking you something really kind of narrow or really targeted. And if you start talking about your personal experience, do it in such a way where you're in, you're back in, you're out, you're back in to the question immediately, right? So in this scenario where they say resilience and adaptability, you could say, well, I would do this, I would do that, I would do that. One other thing I would do would be to do X, Y, and Z, because when I was in a similar situation, 5 years ago, I found that that's something that really calmed me, right? Or alliance building. One thing that I would do would be to maintain, I would follow certain blogs, because when I was, working overseas for this NGO, following these different blogs actually gave us a lot of good information. And it was a really effective strategy to learn a lot about the local market or the local environment. So I would adopt that same strategy here because it was effective. You see, you're in your backup like that with your personal history, right? Unless they're asking you specifically about your personal history, in which case you elaborate. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yes, thanks so much. I know in a previous session you mentioned that we can get example of questions from our mentor, but if we are not in a position to contact someone, or like for any reason that we're not going that route, would it be possible to get kind of a summary of a few questions, diversity of questions that we can use just to practice on our own?
I'll post here in the chat some of the samples that have been circulated to the mentors. Oh wait, this is certain way now.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so here's just a bunch of different ones, and you can just look at it. But again, it's not the answer, it's your answer, right? So you have to think through, how would I answer this question? What is it that this question's looking for? What's the competency that's being assessed? There's one question in here, I think one or two questions in here, that I've put several different competencies at the top, because you can answer it from different perspectives. And the practice in that case is to say, oh, okay, I'm going to answer it first from this perspective, and I'm going to answer that same question from the other perspective as well, right? So I'm going to I haven't posted it yet, so don't worry if you don't see it. I'm just looking for it now because I believe the question's really short. Yeah. I'm going to send it now. I'm going to look for it here. Okay, do you see the questions now in the chat?
Yes.
Yep. So you can copy paste. Oh yes, it was question 4. See, so question 4 in that list, notice that I put 3 different proficiencies at the top. It says, describe a time when you had to deal with a difficult client. Please explain what your role was, what you had to accomplish, what the challenge was with the client, and how you resolved the issue. Please refer to one of Global Affairs Canada's competencies. So it's resilience and adaptability, or intercultural proficiency, or influencing and alliance building. So you should be able, if you can pick an example where you have to deal with a difficult client, can you answer it from these different perspectives, looking at your own history? So that's what I mean when I say, think through some rich examples, things that had a lot of different moving parts, that it required a lot of you. And that's where you can pull, that's the scenario you pull from if you're going to be making reference to your past history. Does that make sense? Okay. And so when you're answering the question, whether it's the oral or the written, make sure, again, you practice answering within a limited time, right? Not the whole time that you have allocated to you, a much more limited time. Because in the written, you want to leave yourself time to go back, read your answer. And again, how are you going to read your answer? Those of you who've been on the sessions before, how are you going to reread your answer? Come on.
Out loud.
Out loud. You're going to read it out loud to yourself. You're going to read it out loud. The reason you read it out loud is so that you catch the mistakes that are there, the spelling mistakes, the grammatical errors, the sentences that don't go anywhere, the things that you wrote where, you were doing a copy paste and you made a copy paste error. And now there's a big section in the middle of another section and it doesn't make sense now. You're going to read it out loud to yourself, and you're going to leave room for you to go back and rewrite sections so that they flow. You're going to correct your spelling mistakes. You're going to reread your notes. You're going to reread the question. You're going to make sure that you answer the question, and you're going to add in anything that you may have left out, right? So you're going to leave time for yourself at the end. For the oral, you're going to practice giving answers within 7 minutes, because what you're going to do is answer the question. This recording now, right? So you can't go back and change what you said. You're going to answer the question and you're going to say, oh, I see, I still have 2 or 3 minutes left. I'm just going to take a moment now to review my notes and review the question and see if I want to add anything to my answer. And that's what you do. You review your notes, you review the question, and then you say, okay, now that I've had a chance to refresh my memory of my notes and to refresh my memory of the wording of the question, I would like to add. And you add whatever you like. Whatever you missed, whatever you think you should have said. I should have said this. Earlier in the question, I'm not sure I really articulated this. Earlier in this answer, I'm not sure I really fleshed this out. So I want to take the time to do that now. Here's what that means. I said I would go out and make new friends. Well, here's what that looks like. It looks like going to the cultural events. It looks like, joining a sports team locally. It looks like talking to my counterparts and finding out what strategies they have employed and seeing which ones I can employ as well. Right? That's what that looks like. So I just wanted to flesh out that section of my answer. Right? Make sense? So any questions there? Any further comments? Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, then I just want to say a final word about the competition. Now, this is not the easiest thing in the world. And you are all here because you made it through the first hurdle of this competition, which is the application stage, right? And some people got knocked out at the application stage. And it's really demoralizing because it's easy to personalize. It's easy to take things personally and to believe that what the department says is the measure of who you are as an officer. But that could not be further from the truth. There's a reason why you work in the way you work. There's a reason why you work where you work, right? And it is not the department that determines what your value is. It is not the department that determines how good an officer you are. It is not this competition that tells you who you are, right? You have to know within yourself that you are so much bigger than this competition. You are so much better than what anybody can evaluate you on this competition. So no matter what the outcome is completely separate from who you are. Right? That's it.
I think we need to get used to any failure for upcoming competition, because I have heard that a lot of people had succeeded after pretty much 1, 2, 3 times.
Absolutely.
So that's encouraging that if we fail, we may have other opportunity.
You'll have other chances again, and many of your mentors have had many disappointments in the past. I'm happy to talk to you about those. Happy to talk to you about those disappointments, right?
But that will show resilience, right?
Yeah, that's true. You have to be resilient. You got to bounce back. Keep going, you know? So there you go. Anything else? Comments, questions, concerns? How are you feeling?
Just thank you so much.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. And have a good
So
weekend,
grateful,
everybody.
CJ. Thanks a
Give
lot.
you a big round of applause.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you
you.
for your time and
Thank you,
attention.
CJ.
Yeah.
Enjoy your weekend there.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh boy. So much.
I don't know
work
how
to
it
do.
looks like, but
Well, yesterday was supposed to be a holiday here. There was no holiday for me, I tell you that.
Yeah. You've been
merci
working for
beaucoup.
us.
Merci. Bonne fin de semaine. Take care.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
care.
Thank you so much.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
Goodbye.
Good luck.
Bye.